I knew that ultimately I want to go back to Vietnam. And I figure even if I endure this pain of going through the Trump administration and dealing with all the paperwork, it would have taken me at least like another 10 years to become a US citizen. I quickly calculated I'll be in my early to mid 40s at the time, which I'm like, well, even if I can go back to Vietnam at the time, my energy level and my enthusiasm would probably be reduced by 90%. And I know Vietnamese have a very strong belief in fate. I guess I truly believe in make that moment count. You know, our life is so fleeting, I would say.
Khang, very nice to reconnect. We've been connected for a while. I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. And, why don't you tell everyone a bit about you?
Yeah, super glad to be here, Quan. This has been on my bucket list for a while to be Quan's guest, on these podcasts. So finally, I can check it off from my 2025 resolution as well. But hi Quan, and hello everyone online. My name is Khanh, and I am Canadian Vietnamese, but I was born and raised here in Vietnam. I was actually born in a small hometown called Châu Đốc in An Giang province. I don't know if you've ever been, Quan, but highly recommend it. Maybe I can take you there someday.
Mm-hmm.
We are famous for, I think, if people who are familiar with the south of Vietnam, these Juba pagoda kind of thing, and Châu Đốc happen to have, I think, one of the better known Juba in the southern provinces. So we receive like literally hundreds of thousands or millions of tourists and actually overseas Vietnamese to come back to pay tribute to this pagoda every year. So that's basically where I grew up, lived there until the old age of 3 years old when I followed my parents to Ho Chi Minh City. Just went through school here. After I got out of high school, I decided to go to the US for college. I got into a few schools in the Boston areas, but decided to settle down on the small business school called Babson College, mostly because at the time I was very interested in their entrepreneurship curriculum. And I think it was ultimately, the right choice. Happy to chat more about this as well, but I think the school has a pretty innovative curriculum where it's called Foundation for Management and Entrepreneurship, where for every group of freshmen, the school actually provide initial funding for them to do a startup for one semester, shut down the business. If there's any profit, which as everyone knows, more often than not, there's always loss. But if there's profit, then all the profit would go to a charity. So I was very intrigued by that program, so decided to go to Babson for that. And the program is so popular in America that I think actually Harvard Business School replicate that model into their MBA program a few years later. The school is known for their family entrepreneurship focus. Some of the families that have a tradition of sending their kids to school, including the Toyota family. When I was there, I met grandson of the founder of Toyota. Pretty cool, relaxed Jews guy. So these are the sort of interesting profile of people that you met on campus at Babson, which I thought was pretty cool. Pretty fun to hear him ditch about Lexus and the models of the different models of Lexus at the time when I was in school as well. So after I got out of Babson's, I worked for a year at kind of like this enterprise storage company called EMC, which you might have heard of, Quan. This was way before Michael Dell bought them and then integrate them to become Dell EMC as we know it today. But it was a huge company that one of the pioneers in developing this huge ass data storage, data center kind of business model, which as everyone knows is like a hot thing in the tech industry right now. I think about a year or so, I felt pretty bored because EMC at the time was already so big and I was literally having like a 9-to-5 job. So, I was trying to find something else to do. So I decided to go back to school for the first time and got my first master in finance from another Boston-based school called Boston College. And after I got out, I then went into consulting. I worked for a more boutique consulting shop in Boston called Analysis Group. Actually, it's kind of fun to work there for a couple of years, I would say. So the firm, essentially, our biggest clients are corporate attorneys. You can think of the people from the TV show Suits. I'm sure you and a lot of people might have seen some episode of them. But those are essentially our clients. These are like corporate lawyers who involved in the biggest M&A transactions, IP, kind of litigations in the US and globally. And they essentially hire consultants like us to help them, run the numbers, essentially. I think the running jokes within my company at the time was like lawyers are very good at agreeing and writing, but they suck at math. So we are the math people for them. Because, somebody needs to calculate like, well, if Google, sue Apple for this IP infringement, how much can they get from that? And to do those kind of things, you need pretty complex econometrics models to analyze, a lot of those kind of before after effects kind of thing. So I joined Analysis Group at the time. It's a fairly interesting time. We were a few years out of the financial crisis, and suddenly, a lot of companies were going through layoffs, right? But it was a huge boon for business, for economic consulting firms like Analysis Group, because we received so much business from the banks and the regulators in the US when it comes to mortgage-backed securities. So for the first 2 years of my life at Analysis Group, I mainly just work on mortgage-backed security litigation cases, or just about any Wall Street banks that you can name there. And the type of work that I worked on range from anything from due diligence to working on these econometrics models to calculate the true damages of what the homeowners lost during the financial crisis, essentially, when the banks bundle these MBS into their bigger kind of like bond packages and resell that to other banks.
Okay.
So I did that for a couple of years. I then it was funny because when Trump first came into office during the first term, I realized that staying back in America would actually be a bit of a disadvantage because it's proving to be pretty difficult to get a green card at that time in America. So I decided to go up north, like many Americans and many international residents in America. Whenever Trump came into office at the time, which is to go to this so-called 51st state now, I guess, of the US. It's called Canada. And
did you go because of Trump?
Yeah. Even during his first presidency, I was on a work visa in the US at the time. This one called H-1B visa that many people on the call know or have experience about. And it was even at that time very, very difficult to get one because the Trump administration at the time, I think, is pretty smart in playing this game they call RFP, which is like request for RFB or something like that, request for further documents, which is they not outright limit your chance of getting H-1B, but they just lengthen the process, whereas they keep asking you for further documentation to prove your case. But in the meantime, you have to like exit the US and go somewhere else. So it was pretty, I think, I would say, discouraging at the time to feel like, well, look, I came here as a student, I worked my ass off for several years, I paid more taxes than majorities of Americans do, and receive this, treatment from the government, right? So I decided to go to a much more friendly
Mm.
countries in terms of like immigrations and I think treatments of immigrants at the time, which is Canada. And another factors I was taking into considerations, which I think could be interesting to OB folks, was because I knew that ultimately I want to go back to Vietnam. And I figure even if I endure, this pain of going through the Trump administration and dealing with all the paperwork, it would have taken me at least like another 10 years to become a US citizen. I quickly calculated that I'll be in my like early to mid 40s at the time, which I'm
Mm.
like, well, even if I can go back to Vietnam at the time, my energy level and my enthusiasm would probably be reduced by 90%. Yeah. So the chance of me like, well, let me figure something out to do in Vietnam would be actually quite low. I like, okay, screw that. Let's just go to Canada. And because, at the time it was super easy to immigrate to Canada, especially for people like us, people who study overseas and work.
Mm.
Because the Canadian system at the time is based on a merit-based system. So, if you have a master, if you study at the school, or if you work for a certain number of years, then you add up your points, and then they just give you a green card right away. So I figure that's going to be a much expedited way for me to eventually go back to Vietnam and either do something or figure something interesting to do, just like you and me doing right now. So yeah, I decided to do that. Move to Canada, first settle in Montreal, in the French-speaking province of Quebec, because Analysis Group at the time has an office in Montreal only.
Mm.
So I managed to persuade my managing partners to move me to Montreal essentially. But I knew I don't want to stay for too long. After I think another year and a half or so, I knew that I was trying to find an exit opportunity, like many consultants, because I think for somebody who's doing consulting, online, I think one of the most important questions you need to ask yourself is like after 2 or 3 years, it's like, do you see yourself to be a managing partner here? Because
Mm.
if you cannot answer that question, it's going to be a very miserable life for you. And my answer for that is no. So I knew very early on that, okay, this is a stepping stone for me to, to get an MBA from a good school and all that stuff. Because luckily, consulting companies like Analysis Group do sponsor like MBA tuitions for top performing consultants or something. So if you get into that queue,
Mhm.
I think that's a pretty good deal to go to an MBA for free because it can be quite expensive, like as everyone knows on the line.
Yeah.
So I did that after my MBA, worked for a NASA group in Montreal for another year and a half to pay my dues, and then decided to quit. And luckily at the time, I got an offer at this, I think, still early stage, little known social media company called TikTok. Little, I guess I'm playing with the word, but at the time when I joined, we already have like 400 million people on platform, which compared to now, I think we already like 4x that number already. So I think we well over 1.2 billion
Mhm.
people like total global user now, ex India even, because we were still brand new. I was very lucky to get that offer. I think looking back, it was one of the most career defining moments for me.
Was this in the US?
This was in Canada.
Canada.
So
Okay.
I got an offer to move to Toronto to
Mm.
start with TikTok Canada. My position at the time was essentially head of strategy for TikTok in the Canadian market, but I was very close to the US team of TikTok as well, like my
Mhm.
strategy team. So I at the time reported to the head of strategy for the entire Americas, including North America and Latin America as well.
Mm. I think
Um,
before I continue there, what's the story of you going into TikTok? Like, how did that happen?
yes. So it was super, I guess, again, lucky because I have a very close colleague at Analysis Group,
Yeah.
when I was in Boston with her, and she joined this exact team, the strategy team at TikTok first. And at the time, the team has like barely like 3 or 4 people because we're still building out the strategy functions for TikTok.
Mm.
And they don't have any presence in Canada at the time. So I was the first strategy hire for the team in Canada. And even with the TikTok operation in Canada at the time, it was super small also. There's probably barely like 20 people. So I'm basically employee number 20 of like a startup essentially.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's the story. Basically through referral from a friend, and was lucky to get that role essentially. And then I did that for 2 years, and I guess was lucky enough that people was like, well, so we just had a vacancy for a head of strategy role for TikTok in Southeast Asia. Would you like to move back to Singapore to run that team and manage, 6 different markets for TikTok instead of one? And I was like, geez, this sounds kind of nice, because my thought process at the time was, I always want to go back to Vietnam, but I'm also scared of the culture shock, because I've never worked in Vietnam before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought like, well, being in Singapore would be a little bit of that like nice hybrid transition for me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought me and my wife was always curious about living in Singapore and trying it out. So we like, well, this sounds like something worth to try. So we literally packed up, true to like TikTok style, right? We literally have like a month and a half or something to just figure out all of the logistic of like shutting down our life in Canada, selling my house, all the paperwork, all the fun paperworks, how it is in Singapore, and, pick up our roots in Canada and just like move to Singapore. And this is in early 2023. And, I stepped into my role with TikTok in APAC at the time, in a similar capacity, but I guess much bigger scope for TikTok. It was a fun journey as well. But I would say that in hindsight, I much prefer my time with TikTok in North America, and happy to, go deeper into the difference between the two cultures, the two, organizations, I would say as well later on. But yeah, did that for another, I guess, almost 2 years. Decided that, Singapore was not the place that we wanted to be. And again, always want to go back to Vietnam. So when I got this offer from Liobank to head up the company, I was like, well, maybe this is my, next calling, and just decided to quit with TikTok altogether. And yeah, just moved back to Ho Chi Minh City for good, roughly 3.5 months ago. And here we are. Sorry, that's like a really
no, but all good. Same question between TikTok and Liobank. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I think I guess, I talked about how I got my job at TikTok is through a friend. This is why I think relationship really, really matters with the environment of countries and working cultures like in Vietnam. Relationship matter 10x, I feel like, even compared to the Western world. This was through, just an acquaintance who knows, one of the board member at OCB Bank, which is our mother bank at Liobank, our custodian bank, who's looking for somebody next to head up Liobank for the next phase. So they just introduced me to this board member, and the rest is history.
There are so many things to, I think, dive deeper into and unpack. But I think what's based on what you just shared, what is most interesting would be, how do you cultivate those relationships to give you those opportunities? It feels like, each of the big milestones that you had came to you in a way. Do you think there is some intentional doing from your side?
Yeah, and I think that's such a great question, Juan. And actually, I never realized this, but my wife was the one who pointed this out to me. That she's like, you have this like golden retriever personality, and I'm like, what?
Mm.
And then she's like, wow, what she means by that is I'm really open to making connections and getting to know people and hear about their life stories. I think that's, if anything, that's really my one of my, I think, um, better traits, I would say, because I genuinely care about wanting to learn from you. You know, tell me your story, Juan. Why are you here? How is Germany? Give me tips for when I visit Berlin, for example. And I did that for just about everyone I meet. Um, I don't have, when I go to a networking event, I don't have an agenda to, here's like 5 people that I need to like talk to, because it's going to help me advance my career. I think on the other hand, I actually prefer talking to these like wallflowers people. I think normally when I think of that, it was like people who like by themselves, sitting in the corner or like just like, drinking by themselves or something. And then I just came up and try a conversation like, hey, how's it going? Are you enjoying this? And sometimes I make really great friends and connections from all of that. And I made that into a kind of like a rule at work too. I have, I guess, a cadence or routine where every week I would randomly go up to one of my staff at Liobank and then ask them out for lunch, sponsored by me. So everyone was still, pretty happy to take up on that offer, of course. And ask just how you like working here, and what's the story, how do you end up here. I told my HR people that anyone who exit Liobank, I want to talk to them. I want to have a lengthy conversation about what do you like most about working here, what do you hate most about working here, and what are your advice for me, kind of thing. And I think it's just a very genuine curiosity from my part to want to know and want to befriend everyone. That's why my wife called me the golden retriever, because I guess I just come up to people and be like that. So yeah, I think if anything, if that might be an advice to people who are looking for your next big opportunity, something, just don't have like ulterior motive, I would say, when you go to a networking event. Just anyone, you never know whom you run into, right? You can be running into your next boss, or you can be running into a friend who knows somebody who can help introduce you. And that's exactly why I think a community like OV really matters. One, because you give people that chance, right? That access, that opportunities for you to connect to other people. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I was about to say that myself, but thank you for saying it. I think that's exactly the right approach. And you see, the best networkers or the best ones in the community are actually those that just are genuine networkers, just curious about people. I think a lot of people think of this networking term as in you back engineer. You choose the targets that you have, and then you work backwards from there, and then you cold outreach, and then you work towards. I think that's one method or one option of it.
Sure.
But there's this vast ocean of serendipity and random and unknown opportunities that you can only work forwards to. Yeah, and that means just being a value-driven, kind, helping person. And things will come to you. So it's sounds a bit spiritual, but that's the only way, right? Because time only goes forward. Connections are only made forward. And so I think your example and even my own story are great examples of, why networking or just being curious works well in life if
Yeah,
you just
100%, Kwan. It's funny, like when I met my Liobank team for the first time, people were like, well, what's your like philosophy in life? And I told them that there's one Japanese philosophy called Ichigo Ichii, which literally translates to I don't think English has a good way to like translate this, but it essentially means that you have one chance, one moment in life to meet somebody and make it count, you know, make it worth. Like me and you, Quan, like you from Germany, I'm from Canada, Vietnam. Somehow, you know, we met, and I know Vietnamese have a very strong belief in fate. I guess I truly believe in make that moment count, which is that, our life is so fleeting, I would say. It's, there's what, 7 something billion people in the world at this point. And somehow you and I meet, let's make it happen. Don't be a dick to each other, help each other out, support each other. You never know. Next time when you need somebody, for something. So make every moment count, make every connection count in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, and again, I see people like you, are very value upfront, coming in with this very genuine mindset of I just want to be supportive, and I just want to be an ally. And I think these are the ones that you keep in mind as well when you move on or meet them, and it really matters, right? If we are already on the topic of networking and connection, you said in Vietnam relationships matter 10x or more. What do you see are the differences between non-Vietnamese cultures and Vietnamese cultures in terms of relationship building and connecting?
It's funny you ask. I quickly realized, even after just a few short months of working here, that even though, at work, we exchange emails and Teams, Slack messages, whatever, right? Behind that, there's this whole system and networks and of making that happen. And I'm gonna get to my point in a second, but essentially it's, for example, if I want to get my marketing budget approved in the next quarter, whatever, right? There's this formal process of submitting your document to, whatever the finance team, the legal team, and then all the way to, the CEO desk, obviously after being vetted by his support team, and then all the way to the chairman. That's essentially how it works here at OCB and Liobank. And every step of the way, right? It was basically built from, I guess, months and years of relationship with those people in charge of those stuff. And what I mean by that is, even I saw emails from people like asking questions about these documents, or like, oh, okay, I approve, whatever, right? Behind that, there would be like, tons and tons of like silo chats about like, why is this the case? Why is this the number? And that's when you need to rest on my team, for example, because they know the people who are asking the question, and they know why they are asking that question. And chances are, they have gone a long way with those people in the past before, from working together and all that. And sometimes, when I first came here, I saw like, oh, wow, okay, this got approved pretty quickly. That's great. And I asked my team, and they're like, no, we they call us like 100 times yesterday to ask about these particular questions and numbers and all that. And that's why I'm saying this is like formal way on the surface when you see like how certain things are done in a Vietnamese company, for example. But beneath that, you need to really truly understand, this intricacy of the networks of, okay, who are the stakeholders here? Who are the main decision makers? How close I am to them? How close is one of my staff to them? What do they need from us? And go from there. Because chances are, unlike, I think, in many, many Western kind of organizations, things are kind of like in your face in a way. These are more subtle, like the most important decision happen on your Zalo chat, funny enough. So that's, I would say, one of the insight I claim from being back here.
Thank you for sharing that. Super interesting. At this point in time, opening up to the audience, I have the chat window open. Feel free to just ask your questions there, and I will take them live to Khang. But while people perhaps are thinking about the questions,
Yeah, and I forgot
okay,
that I mentioned this at the beginning of the call, but like I mentioned to Juan, I've done MBA consulting before, so happy to speak to people about whether you should still do an MBA. I've been on a board of a nonprofit in Canada before, one that specialized in disaster relief efforts for people in very impoverished situations. So I'm happy to talk about nonprofit, whether you're interested in being a board member, how to fight with your board member as well would be something I can speak about. Obviously, anything related to tech, even though Quan probably be a better resource than me. And I guess, if you want to chat about digital bank, I'm also happy to chat. And if I can convert you to be a Liobank customer, then that's my big win for today.
Thank you, Khang. So while we're waiting for a few questions to come in, perhaps I will just take you up on the first topic. Oh yeah, here we go. David, why would someone
Thank you,
consider a career in consulting and or pursuing an MBA? Khang.
Sure. So yeah, let me address David's question first, right? I think even at this point in time, with the advance of AI and all that stuff, I still do believe that consulting is probably one of the better career choices for somebody in life. And what I mean by that is, okay, if you somehow, right, when you're in your early stage of your career, you know exactly what you want to do in life. For example, look, I'm pretty good at math and CS. I'm going to be an engineer for Google or Meta. Then kudos to you. And you go do that for the rest of your life. Chances are, I would say, and I haven't conducted any formal survey on this, but more than half of us, when we got out of college, even we have no freaking clues what the hell we want to do in life, or what's our ikigai kind of thing, right? So I think consulting is one of those rounds where it gives you that more generalist point of view of many different industry, many different business model, where you can ask yourself oh, okay, interesting. Do I see myself as the owner of that business? Or, this CEO sucks. He has no idea what he's doing to run his company, and he's running it to the ground. I'm going to be doing a much better job than he does. Great. Now you figure it out. And I think the training in most consulting firms are so grueling. It's almost like, sending your kid to a military boot camp in a way, because when you come out, that at least they can pick up one of the fairly useful skill that you can use in your career, right? No matter what kind of career that you follow. And I'm talking about not just technical aspect of that, but primarily more on the people side, right? On the soft skill side, on the how to influence people that matter. So I would say in that regard, for folks who, still well, I'm not sure what I want to do or whatnot, I think consulting is a great option for you. MEA is interesting case. So let's say that you're already a consultant, then somehow you you secure that sponsorship from that firm that you're working for. Yeah, I would say go for it, because chances are you only need to come back and work for another 1.5, 2 years at the consulting firm that you came from. Even though you hate it to gut, you can still, probably just soldier on for another 2 years, get sponsored for a tuition that's north of $200K at this point, to do a program where I would say, depending on obviously where you are and what you want to do after your MBA, and what you're looking for, you can either cultivate some of the most important relationship in your life and your career, which is what happened to me. I met some of the best and closest friends in my life at my business school, whom I were honored to invite to come to my wedding as well. So I think those things matter to me at least. So in that aspect, I still think doing an MBA is worth it. If you think of MBA as this magic one where I'm just gonna come in and then leverage the school name or whatever to like become, the next CEO or whatnot. I think that mindset used to be true, but it's rapidly being challenged now. Mostly because the price tag that you associate yourself with a top tier MBA when you get out of school is so high that a lot of companies, and because we still in a pretty challenging, I think, economic environment, right, will think twice before hiring you, even if willing to take a pay cut or whatnot. Which I'm not sure if the ROI works out if you're paying like 200K, for that MBA program, right? So that's why the ROI, the math that you need to do is, I think, very specific to every single one of you. And I'm happy to check more on any specific situation for you guys after the call as well. But that math, you have to do it yourself, to figure out whether an MBA is still valuable to you or not.
Thank you, Khang. And we can actually continue this conversation on MBA in the community as well. I think a lot of people have different opinions on this, including me. But let's move on to the next one. And the next one is just a statement that I want to present to you, which is, I'm already Liobank customer. But we have another person who asked, Liobank is interesting, but how are customers receiving the product? So please give us the pitch of why we should use Liobank.
So I think, and I assume, people on the call was mostly in our generation plan. So with us, even, millennials and then Gen Z, right? I think one of the things that I really hated doing in my day-to-day life is to go to a bank branch, because chances are you're going to run into a very moody, bank cashier on that day who's sitting behind a huge pile of paper work that she or he needs to file. And the last thing she or he cares about is to help you. And what do you need to live off, the banking sectors on the day-to-day, right? You need basic payment solutions. Then you need basic checking, saving products. And then a little bit more advanced to that, then you need proper insurance product for your futures or your own safety, whatever. And then you would think about investment product. So it's really catered to the different stages in your life. Like, for example, me and Quang, we just got married. Next thing we know, we're probably going to think about, having a family, saving for that family. So a bank that exists should cater to exactly that different need and that different stages in your life, right? If you're trying to sell to an 18 years old college student, hey, I have this great insurance product, life insurance, he'll be like, what the hell? I don't need that now. And so I think many digital bank like us exist because we want to make that customer experience 10, 100x better for people. With Liobank, we are one of the few banks that have the ability to issue you a combined credit debit card on the spot, because I think we have one of the top tier proprietary credit scoring model out there that we can quickly gauge how much credit worthy you are within a few hours, a few minutes of you going through our onboarding flow, right? And then we can immediately issue you a credit debit card on the spot if you choose to have that credit debit card. Many other banks in Vietnam cannot do that. the normal onboarding flow is you come in, you give them your, Căn cước công dân, which is the national identity. And then, on a piece of document, by the way, you had to fill out. And then they're like, yeah, we got to get back to you next week on how much, your credit line is going to be, even assuming that you even got one, right? Assuming that you even got approved. And I think that's pretty shitty, I think, customer experience in my mind. But for us, right, we have these POS all over Vietnam that you can go to get your card immediately, within the hour. Or we even have a team of courier that can come to your house, your office, whatever, to help you with the onboarding process and give you your card right on the spot as well. And I think that's one of the biggest differentiating factors for us compared to other banks in Vietnam.
Thank you so much. Thank Khang. We have another longer question from David. I will show it on screen. He asks, okay, it doesn't show the full question, but let me just read it out. What have you learned through your work experience, specifically culture in various countries? What tips would you share with if someone would like to create a path toward going back to Vietnam to work and or start a new company?
I think I touched on this a little bit before with Quang as well, David. But my description of working in Vietnam, you need to be aware of this, I would say on the surface relationship and beneath the surface relationship, and then that's very important to figure out as soon as you started working in Vietnam. And I think that's probably one of the bigger differences between working in a market like Vietnam compared to more mature markets that we've been probably used to. So maybe I'll spend more time to address the second part of your question, which is on what tips. I think on this I would borrow an analogies of starting a company, because I feel like going back, uprooting you and your families to a different country, back to Vietnam, could be very much akin to, starting a startup, right? Because it's almost like starting a new life again. And you can choose, I guess, like, the more or, semi-conservative approach like I did, or you can choose the real entrepreneur approach, which is to jump right into the fire. And with my approach, right, I think if somebody has that opportunities to, whether you come from the US, Canada, the UK, Germany, Australia, whatnot, I would actually recommend that if you choose South Asia to be your home base for the next several years, for example, be in Singapore first, be in Hong Kong first, because I truly think having lived there, right, it's really give you that 10,000 feet view of how different markets, how different people, how different cultures work. Chances are when you find yourself in either Hong Kong or Singapore, you're going to be working for a multinational, which means that you have an opportunity to maybe manage people from different cultures and also travel there and then working with partners there. And I think that's such a valuable experience that you can bring to the table when you eventually decide to settle down in Vietnam. One example I can give is at TikTok, we work with many fintechs in different markets, right? There's a lot of, I think, case study that I can draw from my time working at TikTok, helping these big fintechs in the Philippines, which I would argue to be on a little bit more mature scale. Mature, what I'm using here is relative, right? Compared to Singapore, no. But compared to Vietnam, yes. A more mature stage compared to many of the fintechs in Vietnam. And there's a lot of digital banks there that, whom growth lessons, pain point I can draw from and apply that to Vietnam, right? because chances are that the cultures, the challenges that they run into are actually quite similar to what you see in Vietnam as well. So I think putting yourself in that kind of position is pretty invaluable for whatever organizations that you choose to whether you choose to build yourself or you choose to join when you come back to Vietnam.
Love that. Cool. Next question. Leadership style. What is your approach, Khang, to a new organization or team as a new manager?
I think that's another really great question. Is and always my my favorite topics. My leadership style, I would say, is a bit more laissez-faire in many ways because I'm not a what do you call it a micromanager by any means. I'm more of people who inspire my team to do things and I think here to answer your questions, I would use I think a management a leadership philosophy that I think we cherish at TikTok at ByteDance, which we call context no control. I don't know if one people in on the call heard about this before. But context no control really means that when you work with your team, your role as a leader, as a manager, is to provide them with all of the sufficient context that they need to carry out a project. You give them your vision, you give them the expectations, how that work product might look like at the end, and you give them a deadline and many other things specific to that project sprint, whatever that you're trying to push, but you leave the rest to that because it's like a trust fall thing where you trust your leaders, your people managers, or even your IC to carry out the work for you, and you don't control how they make the day-to-day decision, but you only provide sufficient guidance and check-in during the process of the project. I have a no surprise policy at Liobank where I told my team, no matter what time of the day, and then I give my team a classifications of, things that they need to tell me at 2 a.m. at night, at 6 a.m. in the morning, or at 9 a.m. in the morning, right? I'm just making the hours up, but you get the point. And I told them for the 2 a.m. thing at the night, I don't care what time it is, give me a call. I don't want to be the last person when I walk up in the morning to learn about it. So use your best judgment, but I don't like surprise. I don't. Bring me on earlier in the fire and I would help you put out a fire. And as we all know, there's many, many fire when you first started out. And I think it's very important that you communicate that very, very clearly to your people leaders, to your people manager. I would describe that as my management style.
Thank you. Let's jump right to the next. We have a question from Lan. She's giving you a bit of praise first. Thanks, Ang, for sharing your journey and providing such rich context. She would love to dive deeper into the strategic roadmap for navigating consulting exits. What was the tipping point that led you to leave consulting? How did you explore and identify exit opportunities before the TikTok role came along? Just more career.
Yeah, and I think consulting is such a lucrative career that you essentially tie in your own golden handcuff, because if you think about compensation, benefits, and all that, chances are more than half of the opportunities out there are probably not as good as that. If you only in this for the money, and in this, I mean, as in your life, right? You have your own life to make decisions. If you only in this for the money, then it's gonna become a very difficult kind of like options when you have to think about those exits. For me, I very quickly early on, I know my first 6 to 8 months, I was learning a lot. I quickly learned all of the Excel shortcuts that I need without using a mouse. Those investment banking memes, consulting memes that we see on Instagram. It's true. You need that in order to have that 15 minutes to grab lunch. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make it. And I think, once you pass that boot camp stage, and then, you got to work on real engagement, you got to talk to CEO, executive at many firms and see how they work. I think it's then sort of become pretty repetitive to me in a way, because I think, and then, again, this is like differ from people to people, but I'm somebody who prefer drilling down into that and not just, stopping at, hey, you need to cut costs and grow revenue 2x next year kind of thing. To me, that means that, okay, here's the $10 million advice that you guys paying me to build and to give it to you, right? But I think I care enough at that point that I want to make sure that it happens to you. And if it doesn't happen, I want to know why. So I can learn myself as to, whether my recommendations is legit or not. So I think with many, many consulting type of engagements, the latter part of the equation, it doesn't really come to you that easily. Very early on in my career, I know, this is such a fantastic environment. I got paid a lot. I got to meet, very cool people, but I want to be the owner of that whole process from beginning to end, right? So I decided to, okay, I'm gonna just do this for a few years, somehow get them to to pay for my MBA, and then I'll quit after that. So that's essentially my thought process for the consulting industry in general.
Cool. Just quickly, Khang, we are at the hour. If you want to drop off, just let us know. But other than that,
No, I have more time if people are willing to endorse me, of course.
Wonderful. Okay, let's jump to the next by Sang. What were the most common backgrounds besides consulting for StratOps hires during your time at TikTok? And is there any difference between leading the strategy team in Canada versus Singapore?
That is a very good question, Sang. I think we, for the longest time, we have this healthy debate with my department leads among all of the, strategy leads for her. And my department leads are essentially the head of strategy for TikTok globally, about what kind of a profile we want in our organizations. And for the early stage of our existence, within TikTok, I think we're very geared towards these fairly traditional background of, okay, you got to come from one of the MBB, you got to come from one of the Goldman Sachs and the JP Morgan of the world, and then we would welcome you. And then quickly we realized that that's not the optimal formations of a team that we want, because chances are you getting people that come from very, very similar backgrounds, and we all know, the end result of that. And so we try to think of ways that we can diversify our candidates' backgrounds more. So we started to look into, I would say, if I have to rank from my point of view as a head of strategy hiring before, was the A+ profile to me would be somebody who did an MBB and then worked at a tech company, whether, the Google of the world, the Meta of the world, but because they feel like their impact at Google and Meta, and Quang can chime in here as well, was pretty minimized, because the work that you do are basically just a cog in the machines, and you want to make, much bigger impact, 10x, 100x that at a kind of very similar business model, but quickly growing organization like TikTok, then, come to us. So that are what I describe as more of my A plus profile that we aiming for at that time. And by tech, I mean that we love people who come from, an MBB and then a Google, a Meta, or also other big techs too, not just that we love people from, we love Google or one. But, obviously there's a lot more names on the list. And then the second tier to that would be, either people who only have an MBB or an investment banking background, or people who only work at a big tech. I think that kind of framework um, frame the next phase of the growth of our strategy organization at the time. The following phase, we really quickly realized, okay, this is getting interesting. I think we get more diversity of opinions in the room here, but that's still not enough. So we then branch out to more even like, people who've done startup only, people who only work in like a strategy capacity at an advertising agency before, who, help their accounts grow 10x, 100x, whatever. We would be interested in you as well. So those, I would say, the evolutions of how we think about the type of profile that we hire at TikTok, at least on the strategy capacity.
Yeah, quick insight from me. I think from my own time in Singapore, if you look at the LinkedIn profiles of typical Vietnamese in Singapore, you just see people jump between big techs a lot. Mm-hmm. 3 years Meta, then 2 years Google, then 2 years TikTok. So that's super common, especially in the sales account team. Well, yep. You just jump around. Salaries are similar, but whenever you do a jump, you can make a salary jump as well. So the next employer won't really know your previous salary. So it was a very common strategy just to jump levels. If you're kind of slow to get promoted here, you just jump to the next and then you try to negotiate a bit higher. So very common strategy there. So actually the hardest thing is to get into the first big tech, and then from there you can actually switch moderately easy in between.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, since Quang mentioned that, I know this is not Lang's question, but since we're talking about, the cultural difference between Vietnam and otherwise, here, everyone knows how much you're making. Chances are, in order to formalize your offer, the HR person is going to ask you for your pay stub, your last pay stub, or everything, the most official documents that they can get their hands on. It's something that I'm still a bit shocked when I got asked that, because, like Juan said, like in Singapore, people rarely ask for it. In Canada, in the US, I think there's actually rule against that. So nobody ever asks you and that becomes, more fun, where it becomes a bit of like a negotiating, and these different salary negotiation strategy that you have to implement, right, in order to make it work for you. But in Vietnam, things are, a little bit more, you have to be more willing to share your privacy, your data to the other party.
It's something as well
for people to be aware of when you come back to Vietnam.
Yeah. There was a second part of the question, maybe quickly. Is there any difference between leading strategy in Canada versus Singapore?
Okay. Yeah, sorry. For my strategy team, I would say not as much, because chances are, I feel like more than half of my team in Southeast Asia also, study and worked in the US, Canada, UK, Europe before. So it's actually very similar ways of working style and culture. So, you pick up immediately. What I say different the most is your set of stakeholders. Your sales team that you work with, your product team that you work with, chances are, those teams, there would be a lot more local people present. And that's when you have to figure out the right style, the right approaches to them. Like I said about, working, how you work with a Vietnamese team, things are never as it looks like on the surface, but you need to dig 10 layers deeper in order to understand the intricacy of the stakeholder and the network of relationship to make something happen. That thing you need to figure out. And, every country had that. Every country in Southeast Asia has that kind of thing, but some, a bit less than the other, but it's very much that kind of framework that you need to figure out.
Cool. Next question again from Lan, showing it on the screen. We all see the successful outcome of you now, landing an opportunity at TikTok as the first Canada strategy head and now leading a top Vietnamese digital bank. But we'd love to hear about the struggles and how you navigated the challenging, miserable phase of consulting exits and career transitions.
I can't see the second part of.
Okay.
I can see Lan.
It shares struggles you had in consulting and
because it's got like cut off. Thanks Lan for the questions. I think truly at the time, right? And I know that I'm kind of more risk averse than a lot of people, but I'm still very willing to take a certain amount of risk with my life and my career. And even I know I was quitting, like I mentioned before, a very lucrative career. I know that I'm on a fast track to be a managing partner at Analysis Group, which by the way is a very, very nice outcome within, a decade, essentially, right? So I'm looking at probably late 30s or early 40s when that can happen. And obviously, when you run your own spreadsheets, right, that becomes a very, very challenging equations that when you look at and like, what am I doing? Leaving all of that behind for a Chinese tech company who's at the time is really we're growing a lot, but we're having such a hard time convincing clients to shift away their budget from, Quant's, Google, from Meta, from YouTube and whatnot, right? That's a very difficult issues and problems that we were solving at the time, right? And we don't know if we can solve that because as everyone here knows, it truly is, exists a sort of oligopoly model for big techs, right? Especially in the US. So for our challengers like us, like TikTok, in order to figure that out, I think it takes a lot of, willpower and hard work and pain to do that. And obviously looking at that choices at the time, it wasn't entirely clear to me whether I'm just heading to a career suicide or not. And to add to all of that challenges, right? TikTok were just on the verge of being banned at the time because it was like late 2020, the end of the first Trump presidency, and TikTok almost got banned as well. Now, here I am thinking to myself, like, wow, I guess I have to tell my parents that I'm going to a company that might be shut down in a few months. And, which is not a great conversation for us to have with our Asian parents, right? But I think I'm willing to take that risk because I'm getting too comfortable, I guess, with my career at Analysis Group. And I knew that like I mentioned on the previous question, I knew I don't want to be there. I don't want to become a managing partner there. I pushed myself to just take the plunge, really. But I think, yes, the sacrifice, the pains, the costs are going to be there. And you need to figure out your own, plan B of how you cushion that if things don't work out. I think luckily things work out a little bit for me, but I know a lot of people facing, similar options, especially in today's environment, right? When they have a lot of McKinsey, Bain, BCG friends who were basically put on a bench. So they have to look for exit and they go into a big tech company. And next thing they know, they got laid off in 2 months or was even before they can start it. So how do you navigate those situations, right? And I think that's getting more challenging these days as well.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. We have a question from Ming on leadership again. Specifically, what would be your advice for someone who just transitioned from IC, individual contributor, to team lead?
Yeah, thank you, Min, for the questions. I think I asked that a lot during my consulting years when I obviously started off as an analyst and then progressed through the ranks. When I left analysis group, I was managing a project team of like 20 people. And then when I go to TikTok, I got to manage a team again and all that stuff. My advice for any first time manager is chances are, you know, during the early phase of your career, you already figure out what your leadership style is from observing your most favorite and your worst managers in your career. And I truly wish you would meet as many worst managers in your career as possible, because those are very clear indicators of whom you don't want to be, right? And how you don't want to treat your team. And then you can quickly draw a framework of, okay, this is whom I don't want to be. This is not how I want to be treated when I have my own team. And from there, I think it becomes a trial and error process where, okay, my manager, David, Tommy, he was great with me about X, Y, and Z. And then my manager, Bob, who was, terrible with me about this. So this is sort of gonna be my framework going in. And obviously, that's not gonna work as a first time manager, because you are not Bob, you are not Thomas, you are not David, right? Everyone has their own personalities, and it's very hard to brand yourself to become that person. So again, you have to adapt it to your own personalities. Like, oh yeah, like myself, right? Like when I become a manager, I knew that I like talking to people. So I end up just like sitting with my new team and asking them a lot of questions, like where you want to be, in a few years, and, all kinds of questions that people would ask. And, like befriending them and really getting to know them as well. Like what incentivizes them, to come to work every day. Like, do they have a family? Do they have a dog at home? What they like to do? And I think people generally just like working with people who they enjoy hanging out together. And I think slowly or quickly, depending on you, you very quickly formulate that. And then if you want to make it even more formal, then, obviously you can go to business school, because, there's all these sort of literatures on different leadership principle, different leadership style. And, you got to meet with CEO of, whatever names that you can think of there at a business school. But at the end of the day, if you can figure out that framework, how you want to be treated as a person, I think that would carry you a long way in your leadership style.
Thanks, Khang. We have one final question from Ling. It's a bit of a lengthy text, but it's all about differentiation of Liobank, actually. And Ling asks, some of the big banks also say they are pursuing the similar strategies to some extent, where they tailor the product offering according to the customer's stage in life, improve the experience with less friction process, and doubling down on card first approach. So what is Liobank's strategy to differentiate? Or in other words, what can Liobank do that big banks cannot replicate?
I love that questions. And that was, one of the very first questions I looked at, even before I accepted the offer as well, because I'm like, well, I think Vietnam banking industry, it should be a Harvard Business School case study for many, many generation of students to study, because in what country you have 39 to 43, 45, depending on how you count, commercial banks competing for a country of 105, 110 million people with a population of 70 to 75% unbanked or underbanked. So you have these 40 something commercial banks that competing for a fairly small pie, right, of people that you can service. And obviously I know things are quickly changing, as everyone knows, with VNEID and the proliferations of QR payments all across the countries, which by the way is very exciting. But it's gonna take some time, right? To change people behavior always. And how do you compete, right? And so your question is also the very same questions that commercial bank CEO need to ask themselves too. Are you competing on interest rate? Are you competing on customer service? Are you competing on specific lending strategy to specific sectors or not? And I think with us, a whole generation of digital bank like Liobank, we have technologies behind us. So we need to cultivate that. We need to figure out what is our secret sauce, right? With our model. And with Liobank, I touched on this earlier, but I think we have one of the better proprietary credit scoring models out there that we have hundreds, if not thousands of attributes that we can use during your onboarding process that we can figure out quickly, very quickly, figure out your credit worthiness. I truly think that, I think compared to other digital banks, we adopt a credit-led strategy because of our proprietary credit scoring model that can help us succeed in this market. Because chances are, like I mentioned just now, that we are in a market where 70% to 80%, depending on which surveys, which consulting companies research that you looked at, right, are unbanked or underbanked, right? These people they just use cash, they just use gold all the time in their life. But that's quickly changing, like I mentioned. So chances are these people like me and Quang have very, very little credit history in Vietnam. So how do you score that, 70, 80 million people, right? Who are hopefully going to be quickly onboarded and run through the financial system in Vietnam in the next decade or so, right? That's going to be such a huge influx of opportunities for us to do. And I think with our models, we can truly help people who truly want to have access to credit, because I do think that access to credit, obviously people need credit for a different purpose in their life, but I think access to credit is really a fundamental requirement, a fundamental right in somebody's life. Whether you are saving that to buy an iPhone 16, or you saving that to buy your baby's diaper, right? That's truly a fundamental right for everyone to have access to. And I think we can get there. We can help people in Vietnam with our models.
Thank you so much, Khang. This was great. Thank you so much for the insights, the patience as well, going very in depth, being so calm to share all of your insights. Thank you, audience. Great questions. This was great. I think we will do this again. We always ask at the end, how can folks reach out to you? But actually, Lan helped me to ask that. So, Khang, where should OV members, OV folks reach out to you and for follow-up questions or a coffee chat, or even follow your work?
First off, thank you so much, Quang. I'm always a big fan of what you're doing, and I think the community is grateful to you and your efforts building this every day and giving us this platform, right, for speaker like me to connect with people from all over the world. And then I do hope that others can also give back to the next group or the next generation of OBs as well. It's, I guess, my humble request. And how people can connect to me, I make it a rule that anyone who reach out to me on LinkedIn, I will respond to them. Obviously, from sales people who like, hey, we love to partner with Liobank because we selling snake oil or something that that would take I think longer of a response from me. But for people who genuinely like, hey, I love to grab 10, 15 minutes of your time on a call or a quick coffee, I'm always happy to respond to them, because I think this is an advice that I learned from one of my early managing partners at Anasis Group, that truly the only people who are busy in their life are young parents. And the rest, when you hear people like, oh, I'm too busy for you, it makes me questions like, how is your time management techniques, right? I think it's all about effort, right? If you genuinely want to help out people, you're gonna make time for them. And I make it a rule that anyone who reach out to me, anyone who asks for a coffee chat, I'm gonna give them at least 15, 20 minutes of my time.
Thank you so much. Khang, thank you for today. And we see you in the community and around.
Yes, look forward to the next lunches or dinners. But
that's it for today. If you enjoyed this, you will love the OV community. Learn more at overseasvietnamese.com.